Hey guys, doing a video on different types of suspension in the cars. You guys already know because you've worked on these cars, like this sweet ride right here, the Impala, has a McPherson strut up in there. The Corolla has McPherson struts front and back. This van has McPherson struts in the front, and then it's got leaf springs in the back with a solid axle going across. Okay, if we look at this car here, it's got a shock absorber up in there and coil springs with control arms, and then these are secondary control arm right here to support this one. Okay, and then we have a coil spring up inside. The Crown Victoria cop car has a solid axle rear with a 4-link system and coil springs, and in the front it has short long arm. The Hot Rod, this thing, look at this crazy car, has a solid axle. I think it has a mono, no, this has coilovers, I believe, underneath here. Let's see. Oh yeah, it's got coilovers. And then in the front, it has a mono leaf that goes across the whole thing. If you look at it right here, that's a mono leaf spring. And then it has what we call strut rods, front and back, to support it. So that's what this thing is here underneath the manifold that runs from front to back, from the chassis to the front axle, and then it's got one on the rear, from the chassis right here to the rear axle. I'm going to wander around into the different classrooms because there's some other cool suspension that I'm going to add to this from different vehicles and other people's shops. This is our 91 S10. It's an electric truck converted over. If you look at this one underneath here, it's got short long arm with a coil spring in the middle and a shock going through the middle. It's almost the same as the Crown Victoria, and then in the back it has leaf springs. It's got a leaf spring system in the back. It's pretty sweet. So this is a 94 Mustang in this Lovato shop. If we look under here, it's got a modified McPherson strut system. So this is the bottom of the strut, and then there's a coil spring in between the lower control arm and the frame up here. It's like a little coil spring perch. And then if we look at the rest of it, it's got a sway bar on here, goes across, sway bar link, and it's got a lower control arm system. And then in the back, if you look at it, it's got a 4-link. So what that really means is, if we look at the rear axle, all right, look at the rear axle, pretty cool. There's a sway bar going across. There's shocks up in here. There's coil springs. But then there's this control arm right here on the top, and there's one on each side. Okay, there's one right there. And then on the bottom, there's another one. See? There's another one. So that's a 4-link system. That's what they call that. Pretty cool. And the way they do it to prevent from needing a panhard bar is they mount these ones on an angle to the frame, and the other ones are straight. So it holds the rear axle from shifting back and forth from side to side when you go around turns. Still in Mr. Lovato's shop, we got this old Chevy Blazer. It's a small one, not a full size. In the front, this thing is crazy. It's got short long arm. The shock is inside the coil spring, goes up through the center. And the coil spring is a short little fat coil spring jammed in there. And then we have an upper control arm up here. And then the lower control arm down here. And then the sway bar. Oh, sway bar's falling out. So we didn't finish putting it in. And then if we go in the back, it's got leaf springs on a solid axle. And then shock absorbers. This one does have a sway bar in the back too. These springs have a shackle on the back. This thing pivots like this. So as you let the weight down, this is going to pivot backwards as the spring flattens out. You kind of have to have that, otherwise it won't really work. And then in the front, it's mounted solid to the frame right here. So now I'm in Mr. Cancellari's shop. It's got this old Dodge Durango. If we look in here, looks like it's got a short long arm system because it's got two control arms, but there's no spring. There's a shock right here, right? There's no coil spring in the middle. There's just a shock. So how do we support the weight of the vehicle, right? That's the big question. We look right here. It's got a torsion bar. The torsion bar goes back to a keyway back there by the muffler. Both sides here. And that is adjustable usually, and we can adjust our ride height. But if you look at it here, it's a hex, and it's in the front control arm like that. So the torsion bar actually twists to support the weight of the vehicle. Pretty cool, right? And then it's got, you know, your lower ball joint, your upper ball joints up there. And then if we go and look at the back, it's got leaf springs. Okay. It's got a leaf spring system, kind of like the Blazer that we just looked at. Okay. Moving right along. Hopefully you guys can hear over the heaters. If we look at this thing, this is the old Jetta, 90 Jetta with the vegetable oil system. It's got a semi-independent rear. It's got a torsional I-beam system on it right here. So cool. Whoa. And then I think it's got struts in the back right there. Look at how rusty they are. Holy mackerel. So here's a van in Mr. Dyke's shop. This thing has dual control arm system, right? And then it's got torsion bars also. It's got torsion bars to support it. It's pretty sweet, right? All-wheel drive. Probably a rocket ship, this big old, what is this, an Astro van? Oh, what is this thing? It's a front suspension, strut suspension setup. If you look at it. It's got struts. Oh wait, look. Oh, it's fake springs. It's a piece of blue hose. It's kind of weird. This is a Kia, I think. Pretty cool. So we'll use that to do some lessons too. Oh, and then we go over here. We got this silly Jeep that's been kicking around for years. It's a Students. It's got leaf springs in the front and the back. I think it's missing some parts. I think the steering gear. Oh no, he got it back in. Got big shocks on it. Look at the big shocks. It's crazy looking, right? Big tires. Oh, and then, oh, leaf spring in the back too. Got a leaf spring in the back. Leaf spring system. Not mono leaf because it's got two. Our classroom. We got the giant truck, right? I'll bet you think it's got leaf springs in the front. It doesn't. It has a coil spring system in the front. Look at the size of that spring. It's huge. And then the shock is next to it. And then it's got a strut rod that supports it on the frame. And in the back, it's got leaf springs. In the back, it's got a big leaf spring system. Okay. Why did they put coil springs in the front of this? Because they used to have leaf springs in the front, but the turning radius gets screwed up. So they switched to coil springs on these big trucks, because you don't have, when you turn the wheel, if the leaf spring's right there, it's going to hit the wheel is going to hit the leaf spring as you turn it. So it decreases your turning radius. If we put a coil spring right here in the middle, gives us a lot more room to turn the wheel. So that's why they switched these around and changed them up.